Everything in the body is finely regulated by mechanisms that allow us to maintain homeostasis, therefore, health. With that said, we can understand that a disease is the loss of balance and homeostasis. From a biopsychosocial perspective, health is an implicit right. Applying the postulates of the distributed justice, it seeks to satisfy the needs to create conditions for health through proper nutrition, prevention of diseases, and environmental sanitation. Adolescence is a stage that is characterized by the transition between childhood and adulthood, which implies physical, cognitive, and psychosocial changes. This stage occurs approximately between the ages of 11 and 19. In general terms, adolescents are considered healthy people because physically their body has the strength to resist diseases even better than young children and older adults. However, the adolescent sees himself in the middle of major changes that affect him in a significant way. These changes are physical, psychological, and social. Scientists have studied health enough to affirm that the most significant factor in its maintenance or the onset of the disease is the lifestyle. There may be a genetic predisposition to some diseases, for example, diabetes, but if the lifestyle that the individual follows is healthy and balanced, the gene of the disease remains inactive, and that condition would not. One of the aspects that should be taken in consideration in the health of the adolescent is the state of the brain, since it is the one in charge to carry out basic processes such as emotions, judgment, behavioral, and emotional self-control. Younger adolescents tend to use more the amygdala, which is related to emotional and instinctive reactions. As the brain matures, it uses more of its frontal lobe, which are related to planning, reasoning, judgment, emotional regulation, and impulse control, which helps to reason more accurately. There are 7 behaviors that lead to health. Sleep between 7 and 8 hours a day. Have breakfast every day. Perform 3 meals a day. Maintain body weight within acceptable limits. Practice a physical activity regularly. Do not consume or moderate the consumption of alcohol. No smoking.
I'm Johan Vasquez and I will explain to you the history of the microscope and the history of the cell. Well, this started with Zacharias Janssen. He approximately in 1590 invented the first microscope. It was called the composite microscope, and it consisted in an eyepiece and in an objective. Then, inspired by the job of Zacharias Janssen, Robert Hooke invented his own microscope. This microscope can reach a magnification of 50 times the size of the sample, and thanks to this, Hooke could see for the first time a vegetal cell. After the Hooke's microscope, Anton van Leeuwenhoek developed a new technique to manufacture lenses that allow him to observe samples with the magnification of up to the 200 times the original size of the sample. And well, all these devices created allowed us to reach innovations that we can see on our microscope of nowadays, like the compound microscope or the electronic microscope. And well, the history of the cell. As Hooke introduced for the first time this term cell, when he saw a bark of oak, that is a type of tree, he noticed that the bark was made of tiny spaces, tiny circles, similar to the spaces of the honeycombs. So he called them cells. Then Leeuwenhoek with the lenses that he crafted with his own microscope. He observed living cells because the cells that Hooke observed were dead. And Leeuwenhoek observed tumor detailed cells such as spermatozoa and protozoa and even some bacteria. And Robert Brown at 1831 discovered the nucleus in plant cells. At 1859, Robert Kuliker identified for the first time the mitochondria. Then Rudolf Virchow at 1858 proposed that all the cells come from pre-existing cells. So this is what then converted into the first rule of cell theory. Then in 1981, Lynn Margulis proposed the endosymbiotic theory, which explains with solid arguments the origin of eukaryotic cells. And then, well, the cell theory had been created by the time, thanks to all the knowledge acquired through the years. Cell theory is that the cell is a basic unit of life. All living things are made up cells. The second proposal of the cell theory indicates that every cell comes from a pre-existing one. The third postulate indicates that the cell vital functions take place within the cells, and only one is enough to generate life. The fourth postulate indicates that the cell contains the hereditary information of its development, the growth, and reproduction. And while it's something that will be transmitted through the generation of that species. And also we can add a first postulate, what indicates that the disease begins in the cell.
My name is Liam Jesus. I'm going to talk about characteristics of living things and eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells. The characteristics that unify living things can be summarized in 8 points. The first one is the organization. The second one is that all living things have a genetic code. The third one is that all living things respond to stimuli that come from an external and internal environment. The fifth characteristic is the internal balance of the organism that is called homeostasis. The sixth one is the obtaining and use of energy. The seventh one is, for me, one of the most important ones, is the reproduction, that can be in 3 different ways: asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction, parasexual reproduction. And the last characteristic is the ability to adapt and to evolve. About prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. The prokaryotic cells doesn't have a nucleus. This means that their genetic material is found in the cytoplasm. They are also unicellular and can be reproduced asexually or parasexually. Parasexual reproduction is a mechanism of gene exchange. Prokaryotic cells can have different forms, such as coconuts, bacilli, or spiral-shaped. There are 2 types of eukaryotic cells, the animal and the vegetable. The most notable difference among these 2 cells is the presence of a cell wall in the vegetable one. But in general, both cells are very similar. Some examples of these are the nucleus, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, the plasma membrane, the mitochondria, and the ribosomes, among other similitudes.
I'm going to talk about how the life starts on Earth. First of all, the study of ancient rock fossils revealed that life probably started about 4 billion years ago, when the Earth was very, very young. No one knows how life began on our planet. Most scientists think that it originated in liquid water, but was in puddles on the surface, underground, or at the bottom of the oceans, where volcanic activity created hot springs. Experiments show that the fundamental chemical components of life can be found in outer space or on Earth. Many of them must have reached our planet with the fall of meteorites and comets. Somehow, these simple organic chemicals join together and form more advanced molecules. They began to copy themselves and grow. What we do know is that once it forms, life is incredible resilience. It has been possible to find live bacteria from ocean Antarctic in boiling water within rocks located up to 5 kilometers underground. We also know that these organisms can survive for years in the difficult environment of space. That bacteria are called extremophiles. Once the vegetation spread throughout the planet, the air began to receive large amounts of oxygen. Earth became the only planet in our solar system with an atmosphere rich in that element. By searching for oxygen in other worlds, maybe one day we will find evidence of extraterrestrial life. I'm going to talk about biology. First of all, we need to know what is biology. Biology is the science that studies living beings. According to the partial aspects studied, biology can be divided into many branches. These are the following: bacteriology, that studies bacteria; biophysics, studies the physical state of living matter; biology, biology studies the molecules that constitute living beings; botany, studies the plants; cytology, studies the tissues; ecology, studies ecosystems; embryology, studies how fertilized ovules develop; ethology, studies the behavior of animals; and evolution, studies how species have changed over time.
For example, the testes and ovaries produce hormones and are therefore part of the endocrine system. However, these same structures are also involved in reproduction and thus are included in the reproductive system. Homeostasis. Homeostasis refers to stability, balance, or equilibrium within a cell or the body. It is an organism's ability to keep a constant internal environment. Homeostasis is an important characteristic of living things. Keeping a stable internal environment requires constant adjustments as conditions change inside and outside the cell. The adjusting of systems within a cell is called homeostatic regulation, because the internal and external environments of a cell are constantly changing. Adjustments must be made continuously to stay at or near the set point. Homeostasis can be thought of a dynamic equilibrium rather than a constant unchanging state. The endocrine system plays an important role in homeostasis because hormones regulate the activity of body cells. The release of hormones into the blood is controlled by a stimulus. For example, the stimulus either causes an increase or a decrease in the amount of hormone secreted. Then, the response to a stimulus changes the internal conditions and may itself become a new stimulus. This self-adjusting mechanism is called feedback regulation. Feedback regulation. An organ system is a group of anatomical structures that work together to perform a specific function or task. Although we learn about each organ system as a distinct entity, the functions of the body's organ systems overlap considerably, and your body couldn't function without the cooperation of all of these organ systems. In fact, the failure of even one organ system could lead to severe disability or even death. The human body is composed of 11 different organ systems. These include the following: the integumentary, the muscular, the skeletal, the nervous, the circulatory, the lymphatic, the respiratory, the endocrine, the urinary or excretory, the reproductive, and the digestive. Some scientists add the immune system to this list to make a total of 12 organ systems, but most people consider the immune system to be part of the lymphatic system. You may also find texts where the lymphatic and immune systems are both included within the circulatory systems, which would give us a total of 10 organ systems. Still, other sources separate the immune system, the vestibular system, and the neurotransmitter system from the other organ systems, which will spawn 13 organ systems. Regardless of how you separate the different organ systems within the human body, as you study these systems, keep in mind that an organ or structure that is included in one system may also be included in another. For example, the testes and ovaries produce hormones and are therefore part of the endocrine system.